Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jen Marples Show. Today, I've got a gorgeous guest, and her name is Shira Gill, and she is a globally recognized home organizing expert and best-selling author. And you might have heard of her first book, Minimalista, because that's kind of how I think of Shira as a minimalista. But she is now in the process of launching her second book, and you're actually writing your third book as you're launching your second book. So Shira is going to be dropping some bombs for us today, guys. We are going to learn about how less is more and how actually having a clutter-free life and environment really impacts our mental health. And so I'm going to let her talk all about that. But without further ado, Shira, welcome to the show. I cannot wait to dig in with you. And as we were talking about before we hopped on to record, just having Shira on made me look at some of the piles I have in each corner of my office and made me think about my crowded closet. So this is going to be some therapy for all of us today. And we're going to have action items when we leave. But let's let Shira explain all that and how we're going to live our best clutter-free minimalista lives. With all that, Shira, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today. Woohoo, let's go.
Woo! Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here and love everything you do. So very happy to be on the podcast.
So before we dive into your books and what you do currently to help us all live a wonderful minimalista life, give us your story, because I know you have a fun entrepreneurial journey. So Shira's like one of us. She's an entrepreneur. She's a mom. She's doing it all. And so tell us your whole story, because we love getting into the nitty gritty to figure out and find out, I should say, where you've been and how you got to where you are today.
Yes. So my story begins when I was laid off when I was 8 months pregnant. I had a full-time job as an event planner. I was somewhat miserable in this job. So my thought had been, I'm going to birth this child and then maybe some epiphany will come of what my new career will be. But as fate would have it, I got laid off in a big wave of company layoffs at 8 months pregnant. And so I kind of found myself at this crossroads of feeling like I knew I was ready to be done with event planning. It was not feeding my soul. I had previously to that been an actor for 20 years. And I had let that career go. I know I said, Jen, you're going to have some surprises today. And so really, I was a basket case, to be perfectly honest. I did not know what to do when we started crunching the math around childcare for this new baby we were having in a month, living in the San Francisco Bay Area, as I know you do as well. It ain't cheap. And so we started thinking about, what I could do to make enough money to both pay for childcare and then some. And my background in event planning had not been super lucrative. My husband at the time was working for a nonprofit. And so really it was this thing where I think I had listened to some business podcast once, and what had resonated was that a successful business solves a problem that other people want to pay money to solve. And so I just started thinking like, okay, if I want to be home with my child Monday through Friday and not pay for childcare, and I could do something on the weekends to make money, what could I do? And in speaking with a bunch of my girlfriends, there was sort of this huge consensus of, how you always help me cut the clutter, clean out my closet, organize my desk. I think you could do that for money. And to be honest, this was pre-Marie Kondo, pre-home organizing kind of taking over in the zeitgeist. Nobody knew that this was a career. And so I was really skeptical, but I just had nothing to lose. And so I cobbled together a website. I literally put out an email announcement to everyone I had ever met, including my dentist, saying, I am launching a home organizing and decluttering business in the Bay Area. If you or anyone you know need help or support decluttering your home or life, I'm your girl. And of course, I was breastfeeding a new baby at the time. So I realized I could only leave my house for 3-hour increments. So I structured my business around that. And really all that I had to offer was I can do a half-day session in your home, tackling clutter and organization. And it just kind of started slowly taking off with referrals and word of mouth. And then I was, shared in a handful of local moms groups and school auctions and things like that. And it really was something that I thought would be kind of a stopgap, not even a career with a capital C, but something that I could do to cobble together money until I figured out my real career. And what ended up happening was within months, I was full. My weekends were booked out 3 to 6 months in advance. I couldn't keep up with the demand. Every person that I talked to was overwhelmed by clutter. And I realized in our kind of fast-paced, high stimulation, high consumer society, this was not a little niche thing. This was something that really everyone I met needed help with. And so it just kind of took off from there. So that's like the origin story.
Oh, I love it. And what was that quote? Because I think that's so powerful to just restate that of figuring out something that
Yeah.
you like to do. That's all. What was that thing you said?
Yeah, it was something to the effect of like a successful business is one that identifies a problem that you can find a solution to that people are willing to pay money to solve. And that's the key part is when I was thinking about different businesses I could do, I came up with a handful of things that nobody really wanted to pay me for. And so I kind of kept going and iterating until it was like, oh, like clutter is such an oppressive force in people's lives and disorganization has such a cost that this is something people really feel the pain point and want to invest in solving.
Ooh, I love that so much. So it's like, starting that business based on a need. So, and this show was started really talking to midlife female entrepreneurs.
Right.
And I love that you, with the baby, I've got this many hours a day on a hunch, figured it out. Now, so you started doing, it became really, popular, successful. So how did then you get into being a published author? And I know you have a really big following. So there are a lot of people that look to you for solutions. So how did you sort of go from breastfeeding mom, at 8 months, like 8-month-old baby type thing to now
Yeah.
you've got this sort of organization mini empire that you're building because you're working on your third book. And I love
Right.
it. I mean, I love this whole story. So how did you kind of make that transition to like go to
Yeah.
that next level?
I'll be really like, none of my business has been by design, which is funny because I teach about like mindfulness and intentionality. And I do feel like I'm very intentional, but it was kind of like one thing just kept leading to the next thing. And so, I started off running this very tiny local business. I got pregnant with my second daughter, had her, kept this very small and part-time. Then once my kids were both in school, and we had worked out the childcare thing and I had more time, I was booked with a wait list, seeing clients 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and I was getting burnt out. My back was hurting. I started feeling like, God, this is not really sustainable for a woman getting older and moving into mid and later life. Like I was hauling people's stuff all around town like a Sherpa, And so I started thinking, because at this point, I loved this career that I had kind of fallen into so much. I didn't want to leave it, but I literally like felt like back when I was waiting tables as an actor and you go home and you feel like you've been hit by a truck. I was feeling like achy all over my body and was just thinking like, how can I do this, but in a way that is less taxing on my body? And so initially I developed a suite of online programs to teach, to others online what I was doing and my philosophy and my toolkit. And that started taking off. And then I started writing articles for different magazines and I loved that, but it didn't pay at all. And then I was approached by a publisher who said, if you were to write a book, what would it be? And I think writing a book had always been on my bucket list, but I didn't really have a structure in place or a specific dream of what that exact book was. But somehow somebody asking me and saying like, we could do this. What would it be? What would it look like? What do you have to say that's different from a Marie Kondo or a home edit? And I think just having that question posed, how are you different? What do you have to say? Helped me crystallize how I am different, right? Like I'm a certified life coach. I'm a minimalist. I love style. I'm a minimalist who loves pretty things. I'm big into sustainability. And so I just started kind of pulling out all of these differentiating factors and ended up writing a book proposal, which ended up selling and becoming Minimalista. And then you would think, I really imagined I'll write a book and then be done and then like on to the next thing. But I enjoyed the process of writing the book so much. It actually surprised me because most people say, writing a book is like death. And I found, God, I love this. I love the creative process. I worked with a big publisher, and so I had a team of creatives and a graphic designer and an art director and, multiple editors. And I had felt so isolated as a solo entrepreneur that I just leaned into that process and loved it. And so as I was wrapping up Minimalista on a walk by myself, I had this funny little idea that, I tell everyone now, like, follow those little sparks, because I almost threw this idea out because it seemed kind of silly. But my idea was, gosh, I'm connected to this really funny, like, niche community of professional organizers. And I have a lot of friends who are professional organizers. So I go to their house and I rummage around and I'm nosy and I look under their kitchen sink and I ask how they organize their medicine cabinet. And I just had this spark of an idea. What if I could travel around the world with a photographer and interview the most organized professionals in the world and share their wisdom and their systems and their hacks and their tips for how other people can be organized at home? So instead of just me and my philosophy, we're now getting 25 different people from different cultures, different house sizes, different types of family. And so I came home from that walk and I just told my agent, kind of thinking that she would be like, settle down, like, that's not a thing. And in fact, she said, I think that's brilliant. I think we should pitch it, write it up. And we sold it before Minimalista even came out.
Wow. So that was before the first book even came out.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I really can't emphasize enough, like, how close I was to throwing out that idea, because it seemed kind of far-fetched and like, who's going to pay me to travel around the world with a photographer interviewing home organizers? So I just like share this story for anyone who's had, a little idea that they kind of haven't followed through on, to just say, like, you just never know.
Oh, you don't. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because we have a really good way of talking ourselves out of almost everything.
Yes.
And so I love that you immediately went and told your agent, because somebody else had mentioned too, I can't remember which guest it was, but said basically, and this is the power of just talking things out, because if you keep things inside, that's where great ideas just die. But if you speak it out, you can speak it into being.
Yes.
And you were lucky in that maybe that was, even if it wasn't that exact idea, maybe then it would have been some iteration of that, but you'd have never known unless you said, I'm just going to go ahead and say this to her and like see what she said.
Totally. 100%.
And there you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love this. So let me ask you this, because I didn't know you're also a life coach, but it feels like that goes hand in hand with decluttering, because you're probably, maybe you even need a psychology degree or something, because I'm sure there's so much psychology wrapped into why we all have clutter. So why do we all have so much clutter, Shira? Why?
Why? Well, I mean, there's no simple answer, but I think, I want to blame our consumerist culture, first and foremost. I just think we are bombarded with messages that we need more to be happy. I think it's infused in everything, and it's hard to resist because marketers are really good at their jobs and there's lots of cute stuff out there to buy. And the promise of buying something to feel better and get that dopamine hit is real. Like, I fall prey to that all the time. Like, I'm a little down or a little lonely, I'm going to buy myself a new purse, right? And then you feel good for 3 seconds. And then you have credit card debt and maybe a purse you didn't need and more stuff to organize. So I do think there's pressure coming at us all the time from every direction. Like even my own mother, when I got pregnant, was like, you have to get this and you have to get that. And, my friends, and really I had to kind of slow down and think, well, what does a baby really need? Like, do I have to fill my home with 9 billion toys and all of the latest gear? Or do babies just need diapers and food and some clothes, So I think it's much harder to slow down and question than it is to just like go with the energy that's all around us of buy, more. I think what I've seen in my work a lot is, especially for midlife women, feeling a void of emptiness or loneliness or feeling lost with consumerism, buying things, doing things that really aren't going to fill that hole ultimately, but it's so common. And I think it's, it's almost similar to overeating or over drinking. I think over consuming comes from that same place of buffering or wanting to numb out a deeper pain. And so I think, it was 6 years into my career as an organizer that I decided I've got to go get certified as a life coach, and get, a bigger toolkit to be able to deal with the guilt and the shame and the loneliness and all of these things that are so human and normal to feel. Because I can tell you almost every client I've ever worked with has burst into tears at some point during a decluttering session or an organizing session. It goes so much deeper than the stuff.
I'm so glad you mentioned all that, because you're just reminding me when I went through coaching training. It was at the very beginning, and we had to just do some, test coaching. I was very new into it. I was still going through the training, and someone had recommended a friend of a friend. And I remember chatting with this woman, and she was standing in a room filled with like 40 boxes.
Mm.
And it was a real interesting exercise to go through, because it's not about, like you're saying, it's not about the stuff. It's like what it represented, what she needed to let go of. And she was transitioning into a new phase of life. And it was very layered, and it was very sensitive, very raw for her. So there is, I never would want to, like, to use your term, minimalize, what all of that represents. And I used to even joke with my mom. I call her a hoarder, just joking. She's not a hoarder. And mom, if you're listening, sorry. But just because she has like little things in her car, and then she's the one who's got the buckets filled with photos and all these things. And I realized, like, to go through that stuff, it is an emotional thing to kind of go through all the pieces, especially when it involves children. And then there's this and that and the other. So I know we're going to get into that in a minute. But before I ask you sort of one of my big questions, your whole philosophy is when we live with less, we create the possibility for more. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think, we need to have breathing room in our homes and our lives to be able to imagine new outcomes and possibilities. I think if we're surrounded with stuff and we're constantly putting our energy and attention into managing stuff, and that means buying, returning, cleaning, organizing, all of the things that go with stuff, there's not a lot of breathing room to daydream or to just even think clearly. And I think, what I've seen as I've pared down more and more as I've gotten older, I've become actually more and more inclined to pare down. What I've experienced firsthand in my life is that owning less stuff translates directly into more money, more financial freedom, more time, which, like, what resources is limited is time, right? But to have less to clean and maintain and organize and deal with, we get to recover some extra time and spaciousness, which I think people are so hungry for. Like, people are literally starving for time in this kind of fast-paced, go, like overstimulated society. Especially I see now, with tech taking over so much. Like, I feel it all the time, the notifications and the email alerts and the nonstop news feed, that there is this sense of like, oh, I just want to breathe. I just want to hear my own thoughts. And for me, my mind is so busy that if my environment also feels busy, I just can't think straight. And so it's almost a way of kind of like, by cleansing the area around me, and having less to process mentally, it creates so much more freedom to dream and think and be creative and be productive.
So do you incorporate like feng shui and like energetics into all of it? Because that's where I'm curious to know, because I know I'm not a big feng shui expert by any means, but I did have a
Yeah.
feng shui expert come into not the house I'm in now, but before, because I felt like something was off and there was weird stuff happening. But it's interesting just about like energy blocks and
Yeah.
just having, filling your space with everything. So I definitely feel that when I've cleaned out and taken things out of corners and even organized drawers that you don't see. But I feel like just knowing there's crap in a drawer, like that's got to mean something too, right? Like you can't
Oh,
just
yeah.
shove it all away or close a closet door.
Right. And I think that's like a big, it's so common for people to be like, I'll deal with it later. And then they have like the depression piles and the closet full of doom. But I do think that just turns into a like layer of mental clutter because it's unfinished business. It's something that you have to eventually deal with that you haven't dealt with. So it is a form of emotional clutter. I think in terms of, I'm certainly not a feng shui expert or an energy expert, but I've always been super sensitive to my environment. Even as a little kid, I remember when my parents divorced when I was little, one of the ways that I kind of soothed myself was like rearranging my room and making it feel good. And it was more about just being intuitive about how my space can feel good. And I think that's different for everyone. But when I work with a client, it's really around starting with what do you want your life to be like and to look like and to feel like? And how can we get your space to support you in that and to help instead of to hinder? Because I think most people I talk to say, my space stresses me out. My space is taking up energy. My space is like, not in good enough shape where I can invite people over even, even the most highly functioning people that I work with are saying like, I don't host play dates because I have shame around having too much crap in my living room. And, so I think it can be so limiting. And I think the idea is to really start with what do you want in your life and how can your environment create that?
Oh, I love that. You're making me think of, and I know you're not like a psychologist, but I feel like there's a correlation between clutter and mental health and just senses like of being calm. And it's one thing that we can control. And I can speak for myself of just having gone through, I like to have a clean desk. And there are the days where you're like, you leave your desk and there's like 30 LaCroix and this and that because I'm sitting there all day. And then I run to like help the kids make dinner and then it's homework. And then and then all of a sudden I'm like, I didn't do that thing that I like to do, which is to kind of tidy up.
Yeah.
And then I come in the morning and it immediately gives me distress. I immediately feel out of control and that I don't know what I have to do for that day. Or I feel just overwhelmed by the stickies and the notes and everything that's all over the place. Like I've been known to like walk away. It's almost like you kind of want to walk away. And
Yeah.
I feel like people probably just do that on a grander scale when it's not even the office. It can just be the house, it's the garage, it's the kitchen.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, research has shown that a cluttered space can lead to anxiety and depression, especially for women. That scale is really tipped towards women. And what I've seen in my work is clutter bombards our minds with excessive stimuli. So it's like we already have so much to keep up with in life and so much to process. But when you're surrounded by piles, even just like a few piles in your office, there's literally more for your brain to have to process. Your brain is working harder in that environment than in an environment that's clean and clear. So I think, in a world where we have so little control over so many things, our environments are a place where we can exhibit control and start to make small tweaks and changes that can help our mental health.
Oh, I love that. And it's the thing I can think of. I remember when my kids were little, and so I had three in diapers, and we lived in the city in a flat on the third floor. It was 1,700 square feet, so every little spot of space like meant everything. And I remember, and everyone listening, when you had little kids, you can remember this, and you can sense that room of just all the plastic toys, all that shit that you were talking about before. I would be shaking of just being so tired, but I had to clean it all up.
Right.
I could not go to bed
Yeah.
with that chaos because everything was total fucking chaos.
Yeah.
when those kids were young. That I remember even my husband saying, like, why are you doing the dishes and putting things away? I said, it was that control. I think it goes exactly to your point. Cause I said, this is the one thing I can control. I can't control my kids. I can't control much, but I knew then, especially in that small space, that all that had to be tidied, it was all going to get destroyed within 5 minutes when they all woke up in the morning, but it gave me that peace of mind. So let me ask you this. So for the women out there, because now you're sparking, like everyone's thinking, oh my God, they're all looking around at their piles. They're thinking, I'm like, oh my God, my closet, my this, my car, all of it.
Yeah.
So it's not overwhelming.
Mhm.
What are the top, like, say, 3 to 5 pieces of advice you would give to all of us to help us declutter and give us peace and give us that zen and give us a feeling of sort of control in this world full of chaos?
Yeah. I love that question. So I would say, my number one step, no matter what I'm doing, what project, what client, is just to clarify, what do you want to create more space for? So before you roll up your sleeves and hit the piles, just answer that question, write it down. What do you want to create space for, so that you have a motivational why? I can give a quick example. For me, it was, I love travel. And, when I got married and had kids, I had this big fear that I won't be able to travel. And so I wanted to always be able to rent my house out to fund travel. And so literally, like, I would get stuck on an object and I would be like, well, would you rather get rid of this object, or, maybe you want to go to Paris? And so it was like worth it to let go of the thing, because I had such a compelling reason of why I was creating that space. So number one, just get that clarity of, what do you want more of in your life? And also, what do you want less of in your life? Maybe it's like less cleaning, less nagging. If you own less stuff, you can have less of all of that. Then in terms of the like actionable, practical stuff, I think the biggest mistake that I see is people trying to do it all at once and to bite off more than they can chew. So you cannot go from 0 to 100 and start by trying to tackle your entire home. It's not practical. So I always tell people, pick one space, and then within that space, a micro space. So maybe you decide, I want to tackle our entryway. And today, all I'm going to do is edit the coats. That's it. One tiny micro project. And what I find is, by doing it that way, you immediately get a sense of accomplishment. I did a thing. I started decluttering. I see results. Now there are less coats in my entryway. It feels a little bit lighter. You can do that with one drawer at a time, one surface at a time. I like to personally stay in one room until it's done and just knock it out one micro project at a time. So I developed a thing called the 15-minute win. Super simple. Pick an area, set a timer for 15 minutes, declutter, put things back nicely, the end, and then you go about your day. If you just do one of those a day, you will start to see your whole home transform. The other thing I would say, so it's basically like, step one, clarify your vision. Step two, pick a space and break it into itty bitty tiny micro spaces and just check one off a day. I also would say, what I see in a lot of homes is just not batching like with like. So if you feel like you lose things, or it's hard for you to find your keys when you're racing out the door, just start paying attention to, do the things that you use all the time have a designated home? And if not, create one. That can be as simple as putting a little dish in your entry and saying, this is where the keys go. Or a hook in your entry, this is where the dog leash that always gets thrown around the house goes. So finding those really simple systems, I think, can be a game changer. And I think people really overcomplicate organization. It doesn't have to be color coded. It doesn't have to be alphabetized. You want to make it as easy for yourself to succeed as possible.
I love all those. It's funny when you think of organization too, you probably think of, I have this immediate thought of like Tupperware bins or the glass jars with quinoa and like beans and this, and then you think about we've all seen those
Yes.
we've all seen those Instagrams or the things in the magazine. You're like, oh my God, like, how do you even tackle it? Do I order 8,000 like glass jars from Amazon? And here's one question that popped up though, and I've got to ask this.
Yeah.
Say you want to do this, but your main person, maybe your primary partner or the main people in your house aren't on board.
Yep.
How do you navigate that? Because I will
So
say that I'm more apt to throw crap away. Like I'm not sentimental about saving. Like I'll take a picture of a love note or something. Like, why are you throwing that away? I'm like, it's just more shit in the house. I did this with the kids' art projects. Everyone can relate to that. Three
yes,
kids over a long, that's a lot of art projects. So
a
how
lot
do
of
you
art.
get rid of stuff without like causing trauma and drama with your people?
That is the number one question that I get. And I think what people really want is for me to come up with a way of changing other people, which I wish I could. What I will say, and I live with someone who is not naturally, my husband is not naturally tidy or organized. We have very different values around that. I think so let's say you're the person who craves order and tidiness and cleanliness. You've got to be in the driver's seat of that. And you have to start with your own stuff first and not touch anybody else's stuff until you have literally edited and organized every single thing that you personally own. So that would be tackling all of your clothes, all of your photos from childhood, your sentimental stuff, anything that you came to the relationship with. Edit and organize and style all of that first before you even broach the conversation. And sometimes there is kind of a lovely like absorption that happens of people just witnessing without the nagging, without the cajoling, like, oh, things are looking a little nicer around here, or like Jen seems like she's really created something beautiful in that corner. So always start with you, and then it has to be a values-based conversation. I think where I got my husband more on board was talking about how do we want our house to function? What do we want to do in our home? And we both love hosting and entertaining. So it was like, okay, if we want to host and entertain and kind of have an open door policy, our house can't be a wreck, right? So that's something he can get on board with. I'm always in the driver's seat of being the one to like buy the bins and the baskets and say, this is where the mail goes. And then I ask my husband and kids to just respect the system. But I can't ask them to create the system because they could care less. So I think it's like letting go of that dream of other people wanting exactly what you want and seeing if you can find the common ground. I will also say, I run a tight ship in our home, but during the pandemic, when we were all on top of each other, my husband was like, I feel like I don't have anywhere where I can be messy. And we literally built a little shed in our backyard that is like 5 feet by 11 feet, that now it's his workspace. He can dump whatever he wants. He can keep it. I will never go in there or touch it. So if you have opportunities to have like a clean zone and a messy zone, or a minimalist zone and a maximalist zone, that can also help, because you're never going to be perfectly aligned.
Well, I love that. My husband always likes to joke when I get into a thing, and you've already talked us out of that. When you get into kind of a frenzy of cleaning, and I know I do that, everything must go. Like we were moving, when we first got married, this is 100 years ago, and then we were moving to Asia. And then I think I was having a psychological sort of break about that. So there was a lot of layers in there. I just started purging. I threw away new handbags. Like he's like, remember that time you threw away like wedding gifts? Like I was purging to the point of, I
Wow.
don't know, I probably needed a shrink or
Uh-huh.
something at the time. And I was just, so it's become the big joke when I'm like, I'm going to clean. He's like, remember that time you threw away all your new handbags? Like threw them out, like in front of like the house and
That's
the tree, and like
wild.
homeless people took them or something brand new. Like, okay, well, I was having like a thing, but it is, I like that idea of sort of modeling it, because I have seen that before when I've done my closet edits too. Like the girls will be like, okay, mom, we want to purge this weekend. So that's
Right.
my term. So
Yep.
they'll go through all the old clothes, and then we can put stuff new. And I will say to them, nothing new is coming in until we get things
Yep.
out.
Yes.
But I love all these tips because, all the women listening, like everyone's in midlife, everyone's got 1,000 things going on. And any way and any tips, tools, and hacks that we can feel calm or cool, collected, and free up that space, and especially women with businesses, just as you were talking about clearing up the space, I could actually feel myself thinking broader and bigger and brighter because you're not weighed down by all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to go throw away half my office after this call, after this interview. I'm like, I'm going to talk to my husband later. He's going to be, oh crap, what are we getting rid of?
I am
shit.
always scanning the room. What can I get rid of next? And my husband and kids are just like, Shira, down. Stop it. Enough.
This question just popped up.
Yeah.
And I know this all goes to like that societal stuff of what, we're supposed to be more and more, like you mentioned, and acquiring, and bigger is better. And I remember walking into a home. It was this crazy huge house. It was like some parents on the soccer team. Clearly they're doing really well. They're very wealthy, but it was like a 12,000 square foot house. All I could think of was, God, that's so much space. And filling up that space and all the stuff that's in that space, and just sort of that minimalist thing of that, it felt completely overwhelming to me to actually think about that. So I'm sure you encounter this all the time. And I'm curious, do people downsize after they work with you? Because I'm feeling this need to, I've got, my kids will be completely out within 3 years. Like, we don't need a big house. Like, I want to go streamline, minimalist, like turnkey, rent this thing out so we can travel. Like, I want to do that kind of thing. Cause I think most of our parents are all in the same house. And let's talk about all the crap they have. My parents have a storage unit for all their extra crap.
Oh no.
I'm sure your clients do too. I'm sure that's like a whole other thing, right?
I'm like, don't say the storage word. Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yes, one thing I want to recognize is the bigger the house you have, the harder it is to edit, because I work with a lot of high net worth individuals that have massive houses and sometimes multiple properties. And when you don't have the constraint of, the physical space limiting how much you can keep, you have to really decide you want to make a choice to live with less, even though you have plenty of room to store as much as possible. So I think, yes, I have definitely had people work with me and decide they want to downsize, or they want to rent their house and, monetize that way and travel the way that I have done. I've seen a lot of people that just almost feel like physically ill with how much they own. A lot of shame and grief around people feeling like, how did things get so off the rails? Like, how did I get here? And I think our stuff has become more suffocating really than liberating. And likewise with the huge home or the multiple properties. While that can sound glamorous, I can tell you the reality for the people that I've worked with, many, many, many people, is I feel like I'm suffocating. I don't want all of this responsibility. And so, I have one woman in my upcoming book who went from, I think, 5,000 square feet to 3,000 to an Airstream trailer, and went from literally 300 pairs of shoes to everything in her entire wardrobe can fit in like 2 bins in a little cubby. And she is living her best life. Her and her husband are now retired. They travel, they drive all around the country. They don't have to pay bills. They don't have to, they have just completely liberated themselves by owning less. And that's an extreme example, but I see it in all different shades of, people just deciding on purpose, I don't want to be weighed down in this way anymore. So sometimes there's kind of a trial of just like living in your space with less stuff and feeling how that feels. And then I think the bigger jump is I want to downsize purposefully. Even if I don't need to financially, I want to. I want to live simpler. I want to live with less.
And I'm going to assume, and I'll ask you, but I'm assuming you probably see this a lot with, we call them free birds here on the Jen Marples show.
So love that.
Free birds, because you don't need that space anymore, and the kids are coming and going, and certainly when the kids get older, they're not going to be there. So you don't need to be, a hotel for the rest of your life for your children, because that also I'm thinking that can also add just a lot of weight and pressure, and then you can't go do a lot of these other things you want to do because you're maintaining maybe a bigger home. So you probably see a lot of people downsizing for that reason, or do you?
I definitely do. Yeah, I think, I'm actually working with a number of people right now who are free birds and their kids are off, and have established their own identities and homes. And they realize like, there's this association of this is the home where we raised kids, but wanting to step into a new chapter and a new season of life, sometimes it can feel really fun and freeing to actually start from scratch, whether by yourself or with a partner, like a reinvention project of how do we want to live now? How do we want this new phase of life to look? Do we want to go be in an apartment in New York? Do we want to go travel around the world? But I think I am seeing a real movement around downsizing and selling or renting out that big family home in favor of something that just feels like it represents a new phase of life, whatever that may look like.
Ooh, that's exciting. And that really ties into, being in this midlife phase of just kind of questioning everything. We question, how we've lived our lives. We question like the careers, and we're at this midlife inflection point. And I just had this conversation with my husband because, we're on this cusp, we've got this school year's almost over as we're recording this, and it's 3 more years. And then we don't have kids living in our house full time. Right. And then that opens up for so many of us so much possibility, and people are working remote. I'm like, honey, do you want to still be doing the thing you're doing? Like we can navigate. And I love this designing this next thing. It's like almost like we get to be in our 20s again, and it just sounds so exciting to me versus like what our parents do. Just because that's probably what they, our grandparents did. It's like everyone just kind of stayed. Yes. And I love that idea of thinking crazy. Like you could live in the Airstream trailer. You could live in New York. You could live in 2 different tiny places. You could have a little tiny place and then go rent Airbnbs around the world and work. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to really lean into, all that fun possibility, but we can't do that if we got tons of stuff weighing us down, the cars and the houses and this 20 surfboards and bikes and this and that and storage units and all that's so limiting. So I love that this all bubbled up. I didn't even know this was going to come out of this conversation because I just think it's like one more thing that's exciting about being in this midlife phase. Like all this opportunity. I think
it's really juicy to think about. And I think it can be hugely motivating to think about that next phase. And I love how you said it's like we get to redo our 20s again. That feeling of like reinvention and where do I want to go? What do I want to do? What do I want my place to be like? There is so much possibility. And I do think our homes can set us up for that juicy life we want to lead.
Oh, this has been such an amazing conversation. I guess I'm trying to think about my micro spots that I'm going to go be tackling after this.
Yes. Do the purse.
I'll do the purse, and my purses aren't that bad. That's one of those things that drive me crazy. You'll never see the receipts and gum wrappers in my bags.
Like good.
That just gives me hives. But as I'm looking at Shira, I keep turning to the right because there's a pile of like magazines that are taunting me and some notebooks that I have to get rid of. And there's a drawer. It's kind of like that crap drawer. It probably has the taxes in it, like the tax files from like 4 years ago. Like, why are they here?
Yeah. 15-minute win.
15. I'm going to go for my 15-minute win.
Yes.
Oh my God. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit and ask you a couple final questions before I let you go, but I could have you here forever. What do you wish for women in midlife?
I think, I feel like society tells us this story that men increase in value as they age and women kind of become expendable or disappear. I know that's horrific, but that's at least what I grew up kind of feeling surrounded by. And I remember my mom saying how invisible she started feeling as she got older and that she just felt ignored. So I would say what I wish is the opposite of that. I wish for women to be hugely visible and celebrated. And I think we should be, and we have every right to be. But I think it's a big shift for society to get there. So that's my dream.
And we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
What do you think the best thing is about being in midlife?
Oh, I feel much more confident as I get older. And I think that was surprising to me to just feel, and I know I've listened to your podcast, so I know this is like a reoccurring theme of just feeling like more comfortable in your own skin, able to own who you are and what you like and what you don't like, and kind of no excuse living, like leaning into a more authentic life feels much more available to me the older that I get.
Oh, I love that. And of course, the whole home conversation that we just had about that, I think that it just marries into that, right? It's
Yes.
just who are you, what you want to be doing life on your terms, not because you need to impress the Joneses or because it's something the way that it's always been done. This is
Yes.
that great time to like ask those questions and ask yourself what you want. I
Yeah.
love it, love it, love it. All right. I want you to finish the sentence. I'm
Okay.
not too fucking old to.
Ooh. Gosh. This is such a silly one, but I'm not too fucking old to order from the kids menu. And I am a person who loves mac and cheese. I always want the kids menu. And I'm at that point in life where I'm just like, if I want a chicken tender, I'm just going to ask. So that is what I would say.
Freaking love that. As long as they let you order from that goddamn menu, because
I
sometimes
know.
they're like, you have to be
Under
12.
12.
Like, or just put it on one of
But
your
that's
kids.
the great thing about getting older is that I just don't care anymore. And I'll be like, it's okay. I just really want it. Can I get it? And I would never have done that when I was 20 or 30.
Yeah, because we're worried about what people think. So don't
Yeah.
care and order the damn chicken nuggets. Okay, so where can we order the book? Because I know you're on pre-order now. So tell us all the things about the book, where we can find you, support you, follow you, and get all your great advice.
Yay. So yes, I have two books. Minimalista is out and available wherever books are sold. So you can get from your local indie shop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, what have you. And ditto for my brand new book, Organized Living. The pub date is October 3rd. I'm not sure when this will air, but you can either order or pre-order literally wherever books are sold. And you can find me online. My website is just my name, shiragill.com. And at Shira Gill on Instagram. You can share your 15-minute wins with me. And I even have a whole highlight sharing 15-minute wins from women all over the world. If you want to get inspired and see other people cleaning out their junk drawer or refrigerator.
Oh my God, I love it. And you're going to want to follow her on Instagram because it's like daily inspiration. It'll just like make you perk up a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, what do I need to do? Like everything's so crisp, clean, and organized. I love that. So I'm going to link all that in the show notes so you guys can find her, follow her, order the book, and all that kind of good stuff. But Shira, I could talk to you for hours. But
Likewise.
ladies, if you're all listening and and looking around your house like I am, we've got work to do, but thankfully we don't have to do it all at once. We know how to do it in bite-sized little chunks so we can have those little wins. And I love anything that's like a little win and that sets you up to have that next little win, right? So
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
it has been such a joy and hopefully I get to see you soon.